Hello everyone and welcome, welcome. I'm Vicki St. Clair and I'll be your moderator for the next 60 minutes or so. Our guest speaker is an expert in his field and is very passionate about today's topic. He's got some great information to share with you. But before I introduce him, I have a couple of quick housekeeping points. First, for those who aren't familiar with Aquent Federal, Aquent's a marketing, communications, and design company. They've been providing innovative solutions for some of the world's biggest and best brands for more than 25 years. Aquent Federal partners directly with government agencies and leaders in strategic communications, marketing, outreach, visual information, creative services, and solutions. And as you'll hear from Dan Neff today, industry-leading technologies play a big part in Aquent solutions. Following our guest speakers, we'll have around 15 minutes for Q&A. Please type your questions into the chat box as they come to you. I'll make sure we answer them before we wrap up. We do aim to finish right at 4 p.m. Eastern, but if you do need to leave before the end, the recorded webcast will be posted on Aquent Federal's YouTube channel. All right, let's get started. I'm very pleased to welcome Dan Neff, President of IT Solutions. Let's put a face to that name there. He has a background in engineering and moved into software development before launching Aquent's technology solutions business in 1996. IT Solutions specializes in delivering innovative, high-quality web solutions to Fortune 100 and Global 200 clients, and of course, government clients. And those clients like what Dan's doing for them because they've formally recognized IT Solutions for consistently meeting and exceeding expectations. Now, today's webcast is a slightly different format. It's going to be interview-style format. So also joining us today, we have Leanne Dries. She's Vice President of Aquent Federal and joined Aquent more than 18 years ago. Lee's led teams within the professional services, high-tech, and government sectors, and introduced UX teams and supported existing UX teams within organizations such as Adobe, Scholastic, Showtime, and the New York Stock Exchange. During the 2014 CD National Conference on Health Communication, Lee's storytelling skills led her team to being voted the best TED Talk concept app by 200 government communicators and designers. Daniel Neff and Leanne Dries, welcome. Lee, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today, especially you, Dan. I appreciate that. So many people are familiar with Aquent. There are many facets to Aquent, and you're going to hear about one of those facets today, and it's called Aquent IT Solutions. Aquent IT Solutions is focused on delivering web and mobile app solutions for some of the leading manufacturers and financial organizations in the world. Dan's going to talk to you about some of those success stories today, but most importantly, how he took his team into the UX space and in a different way than I've heard from most UX organizations. So we're going to hop right into it. Dan, thank you for joining us. And so my first question for you, Dan, is, how did you get into UX and why?
Well, thank you for having me, Lee. We got into UX for a fairly obvious reason to us anyway. It seemed like the next logical step. We had already been developing web applications and from the beginning had a very strong focus on UI design. And so over many years, we had been doing UI mock-ups and using those mock-ups with business people and users in order to clarify requirements and so forth. So with that combined with Aquent placing a large number of UX resources out in staffing assignments and clients becoming more and more sensitive to user experiences, it seemed like an obvious next step for us.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went into it, we actually looked at it a little bit differently than most. My group comes at things from a point of view of, how do we solve business problems using technology as a tool. And what we discovered, having talked to some senior UX designers, is that they get frustrated from time to time because they work very hard to build effective UX designs, which are then handed off to an IT team that lacks the skills to fully implement the design, and therefore the design gets compromised in various ways. So what we decided was it would be a very compelling thing if we could actually take the design to the next step and actually deliver a working experience as opposed to just delivering a design. So we put the two together, user experience and front-end development, and from that we have an interaction between the two. So what we design are things that can be built, and we then build what was designed. Oftentimes in the design process, you can design things that become very expensive to build, even if they can be built. It may not be worth it in the budget. So having a good exchange between the designers and the technologists seems to pay off.
So it's interesting that you say that, Dan. So most people think that design comes before development, but what you're saying is that you need to look at your development and your IT, the backbone, and see what really works in addition to the money side of it, right?
Correct. User experience design is iterative anyway. You end up doing research, then you do low-level mock-ups. You go back to the user community, you get feedback, and so you're iterating with them anyway. So by looping in the technologists early on, especially as you get down to where the actual layouts, the detailed design is happening, then that's where you make sure you don't design something that drives the cost beyond what it's worth for that situation.
Yeah, interesting. So Dan, everybody wants to get into UX, so they start, often small by hiring a UX designer, but you thought very big when it came to UX. You wanted to create a UX center of excellence. Why a center of excellence?
Well, a center of excellence is how we work in general. This is not our first rodeo, basically. So when we launched our business 18 years ago, we did it with a very specific intention that we wanted to be an organization that delivers excellence on everything that we do. And if you're going to do that, what that means is you have to be very organized. If you're bringing a new capability into the organization, you have to pull that together. You have to plan. You have to fold it into your processes. You have to provide training for people. You have to share knowledge, etc. And the way we do that, the model that we use, is we organize around this concept we call Center of Excellence.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So when we're talking about excellence, when you think the word excellence, you always think perfect, right? So your process, from what I'm hearing, doesn't guarantee it, but it improves the odds that what you're going to be delivering in the end is going to be consistently more reliable and exceptional, really, is what you're looking at.
Well, yeah, I don't like to use the word perfect. We have, when we think about excellence, you have to think about all manner of aspects of excellence. For example, in any given situation, there's not an unlimited budget. So if you're going to deliver excellence, you have to take into account the cost of putting together the solution. You have to look at the timeline. Sometimes the timeline is even more important and more of a constraint than the cost. So you're looking at quality, you're looking at cost, you're looking at delivery, you're looking at the functionality, you're trying to reduce ongoing maintenance and support costs and so forth. So you look at the whole thing and you organize in such a way that you can optimize those things based on the value, the weight that the client puts on those various aspects of the solution.
Mm-hmm. So excellence really is defined with every project. I think that your program ensures that level of excellence because you're really working very closely with your clients to define what excellence is actually going to look like, right?
Absolutely. We always look at success based on whether or not we solve the problem we were hired to solve. If we didn't solve the problem, then you can't call it excellent, even if it's defect-free software. If it doesn't solve the problem, it doesn't have much value. So for us, the first and foremost, most important thing is to understand the problem and stay focused on solving that problem, not get distracted into other things.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I think you're going to walk us through a real-world example here.
Well, I want to use an example in order to kind of set the stage for why a center of excellence is important. It's not important in every situation, but if you find yourself in this situation, it's a critical piece. So basically, one of our clients is a Fortune 100 manufacturer, and they are working on implementing improved user experience across their entire channel organization. And they have a goal of establishing a consistent, high-quality user experience across a large ecosystem of applications. Basically, they have a dealer organization that does business with them, and there's a lot of various business processes and so forth involved in a relationship between a dealer and an OEM. And so this ecosystem is essentially all of the applications and processes that make up that relationship. So because of the size and complexity of the relationship, it means that ultimately you have to impact the culture and the process of hundreds of IT people in order to shift and deliver this kind of common high-quality user experience. In order to do that, you have to have some organization in place in order to drive the kind of consistency and quality that you need across that size of a group of people.
Wow.
So let's talk about what's in a Center of Excellence. What is this thing? There's a collection of things that you try to do with it. The first one is to provide some leadership for this whole initiative, get some order in place, establish direction, and also to promote and support innovation across the whole ecosystem. You also need to establish and get governance in place. In this case, governance is established by having management involvement, managers high enough in the organization that they can make decisions for the whole ecosystem, and have them help focus and drive the investment of the Center of Excellence. The Center of Excellence is also there to do research and development. There's all the time evolving trends in technology and design, and you need to be able to stay on top of those and to make a deliberate decision about when and how to include any of those into your overall approach. This involves some proof of concept work so that people can actually see it and touch it. And then also an R&D group needs to be on hand to crack the tough problems that are encountered by the teams that are actually building the solutions. It's critically important that the Center of Excellence is seen as a partner with all of the teams that are doing development. If it's seen as something on the side or some kind of shared service that's remote from them, it often doesn't work. So there needs to be a strong relationship, and it needs to be one of collaboration. So, helping these projects that are basically driving to a specific budget and function and schedule, to have help with the tough problems is a way to build that relationship. The Center of Excellence also has to work on making sure that knowledge gets shared and managed across the whole ecosystem. And so you're doing it across the whole practice, the things that are general in nature, but you're also going project specific. So in some cases, you need to coordinate and collaborate within a specific project, and how you're collaborate with your peers in terms of how you're using the various components of the Center of Excellence. You have to be able to deal with documenting and sharing standards. The standards are what gets you that high quality and consistency. So you have to communicate concepts, essentially the intent, what it is that you're trying to do. You have to get the standards themselves, so things as simple as color schemes and logos and things like that, all the way to how it is that you're going to implement specific controls across the various applications. You need to also deal with things like organization and automation in terms of the way you go forward. For example, in very large organizations, oftentimes every project organizes their project files in a wholly different way because that's what they felt like doing. And there's really no reason or value in having them be different. If you standardize, then it helps you automate. So you can do things like continuous integration, continuous build, automated testing, and this kind of thing. So establishing standards around these things helps you do that. And then the Center of Excellence is essentially the champion for quality and consistency. So it's about making sure that each project stays on course in terms of following the standards and following the intent. It's also about gathering ideas from all the project teams and bringing it back to be considered to whether or not some new idea that was discovered by a project team should be promoted to an ecosystem-wide solution or idea. So it's a two-way thing. The Center of Excellence should also be doing design and code reviews. But once again, it needs to be done in a collaborative mode. It should not be set up like here comes the UX cops and they're going to bust you if you don't follow the standard. It has to be a case where everybody's on board with the concept of how it is you do this, and the UX Center of Excellence is there to provide extra eyes to look across all the projects and see that the designs are consistent and the code is consistent, and that you're getting the kind of quality and consistency that everybody's striving to get. Everybody's in it together. Don't make your Center of Excellence the higher up in the organization than these delivery teams. They'll have a hard time influencing the teams unless it's seen as a collaborative and positive thing. And then the final key area of the Center of Excellence is to build the team. The idea is to create a learning environment. What we find is that there's never enough highly capable front-end developers or highly capable UX designers out there to do everything you want to do. So you should be operating in a mode where everybody who's involved in it is constantly learning and growing. You operate in a mode that's collaborative. And collaborative means many things, right? It means you're working together, obviously, but if you have experts working with more junior people, then there's a lot of learning going on just in the fact that you're working through problems together, and the more senior people shouldn't be just saying, do this. They should be saying, do this because it's better in these ways. So everybody gets a deeper understanding then of what's going on. And then the final stage of that is for the senior people to provide some coaching and mentoring to people that are less experienced than themselves.
Wow. So this slide is really a super checklist. So if I want to build a center of UX, excellence, then these are the factors that I need to consider. Interestingly, Dan, you're a consulting firm, so you will go in and you will consult with a company. Typically, where would a UX Center of Excellence fit? Should it fit with IT? Should it sit under marketing or product development? I've seen it all in all different kinds of places in an organization. Where from your perspective, should it really fit and function nicely?
Well, that's hard to give a blanket answer. I think that it depends a lot on the organization and kind of the centers of power, so to speak. If one organization or the other is more powerful in terms of pushing the direction that they're trying to go, then I think it's important to make them responsible for this whole idea of quality and consistency. It's not an obvious answer where exactly it should go. But I would add another point here too, that is if you're trying to make consistency in user experience across a massive amount of applications, hundreds or thousands, then you may find that it's much more realistic to think of having more than one center of excellence and align them with the ecosystem owner. So in the case of this example I've started to talk about, the manufacturer, within their organization, they have various ecosystems. One is, all applications that dealers use, for example. Another might be all applications that customers use, or all applications that employees use. There's different groupings, and they become ecosystems based on the fact that they have a common audience. So if you organize by that, then what you tend to have is the Center of Excellence is under the control of the management that's responsible for that ecosystem. And that tends to take a lot of mischief out of the organizational problems that come up and make it more effective.
Interesting. You know, I think that you hit such a valid point there that it would be good to repeat it. Wherever the organization has its priority, that's where the funding is going to go, and that's where the spotlight will be on, and that's where the help will come from. So I see that happening in a lot of organizations, including the government. You know, so I think that's actually critical. So that's a good point. So let's talk about getting this thing started. Did you have to convince anybody in your organization to, you know, adopt a Center of Excellence?
Well, for us, the Center of Excellence, the selling is with the customer in terms of how to go about it, and so yeah, there's selling to do. Basically, you have to establish commitment in 4 areas. First of all, they have to be committed to the whole UX concept. They have to understand what the value of improving your user experience is, you know, and it needs to be driven out for them so that, you know, the people that fund it, they're all looking for return on investment, right? So they have to understand benefits. So buying into the concept of applying UX principles is all about understanding what do I get for it? What's the return in terms of benefit to the business, and either in, you know, a higher number of closed sales, or higher revenue, or better quality of input, or more people making it through a complex process, or, you know, whatever it is. There's a whole variety of business results that come out of it, and those are the things that drive organizations to take on something difficult like this. They also have to understand that if you truly want to make a significant change in terms of the outcomes you get, you're changing the culture and behavior of an organization. This is tough to do. There's whole consulting principles and practices around change management that deal with this kind of thing. The bigger the group, the harder the change. And so it takes commitment from top management, and not just for the day. It takes commitment over a substantial period of time in order to make this happen. Finally, they need to fund it. All this Center of Excellence work still has to get done. There's a payoff from it. There's certainly a return on that investment, but it has to have funding. And then the last piece, but certainly not the least piece, is the whole concept of governance. You know, the only way these things get done is if they're done deliberately and they're done with some structure and organization and backing from senior management. That's not to say, you know, you drive it all down from the top. That's not what I'm saying. But you need governance in place to prevent things from going off track. You put a plan together, you need to follow the plan. There's a lot of influences in a large organization. Not everybody's pulling in the same direction, so you need a governance team to be the one to provide shelter for this effort so that it stays on track and doesn't get pulled off track by many other people clamoring for a different agenda.
Yeah.
These are the big ones.
Yeah, that governance, I think, is key. Really, is really key. Yeah. Okay.
So in terms of overcoming the objections, most of the time the first issue is about a concern about return on investment. I like proving it rather than trying to talk through that. So the best way to deal with that is to propose an initial key project and demonstrate the impact of having Center of Excellence type of activities as part of the project. Stay focused on the project and prove the concept so that then it can be expanded to deal with a wider group of projects. Another thing that we've seen in terms of objections is often from what I refer to as line managers in a business. You know, they're the people that are on the hook to actually deliver the applications, to solve the problem, to support the process, etc. They're not a group on the side that provides, you know, shared services across the organization. What we've discovered is in many organizations that use a shared services model, many times the line managers are not they're not happy about being dependent on a shared service organization. A lot of times the shared services groups are underfunded and understaffed, and therefore they can't keep up with demand. And so the line managers get disappointed by the services in many cases, and so they don't want to be dependent on that. They'd rather have all the things that they depend on under their own control, and therefore they're in control of their own destiny, so to speak. So that's where I propose that organizations look hard at putting a center of excellence in place for each ecosystem. That means typically the center of excellence itself is under the span of control of the line manager who's responsible for the ecosystem. Most of the managers under that manager would be willing to trust that particular manager's shared service because they're on the hook to deliver just the same as the other managers are. So it becomes much more acceptable to the teams, and it feels less like the UX cops out there trying to tell them how to do their business. So this type of approach has worked for us.
Super. So Dan, let's talk about, you've been here, you've done this now, you're still growing it. So this is, you're still on the forefront of, creating and becoming, what it is that you want to become. But what have you learned so far? What are the, top 3 lessons that you've learned thus far?
Well, I never claim to have all the answers. We're still learning and growing this thing, but we have discovered some things that might be useful. The number one thing is to keep in mind that good UX design people and good front-end developers are in short supply. As the world gets more and more focused on user experience, I think this gap between supply and demand is going to get wider before it gets narrower. Eventually enough people will be excited and start learning and building the skills. The gap will close at some point, but I think over the next 4 or 5 years, the shortage is going to be very real and will get worse before it gets better. So as you put your plans together, you need to take that into account. If you go out and sell your management on, we're going to do this big UX project, and all I need is 10 top people to do it, you may find you can't find those 10 people when you need them. And so you need to be very cognizant of getting the right talent at the right time. And you need to organize around the fact that it's a scarcity situation. So what does that really mean? It means you build teams with a mix of skills and experience. Don't expect to have 10 absolutely top people. You want to have 1 or 2 top people, then you can have some people in the middle, some people that are junior. And what you find is that in almost any project, but certainly any large project, there's a lot of work to do that is junior work. Why would you put a requirement out there to have senior people that are hard to get do that junior work? Oftentimes, because people aren't thinking that through, it's easier to just say, give me all top people because they can do anything. Well, that's true, but if they're not available, then that's a barrier to the plan working. So think about building teams with the proper mix of skills based on what's available and what's required. Then we talked about governance a few times before, and I can't emphasize it enough. Governance is going to be critically important. I can tell of an example where an organization got very interested in user experience. They put a team together to go out and educate everybody about what UX is and how important it is, and they really did a good job marketing the concept. And then all of a sudden there's this huge demand to move forward, and I want UX in my project, and they weren't ready with the resources that it takes to actually do it. And so then people got all disappointed. So if we go at it in the right way, then you put in place governance, which means the senior management in the organization is on board with putting a plan in place and incrementally going forward with this. And so you pick the right projects and you focus on the right projects. If you have less resources than it takes to do the whole thing, and isn't that true all the time, then you need to prioritize your projects and stick to the priority. And you need that governance protection so that you don't have a lot of managers, some of whom are very powerful, coming to your people and saying, hey, you need to help me in my project over here. And next thing you know, you've got your precious resources spread so thin that nobody's being effective. So you use the governance. If somebody wants to use the people, they have to go through the governance process. When they get approval, they get support. And that way, senior management is making very specific decisions about how to invest that resource and how to get the best value out of it. Once they do that and they see successes, they should be publicizing those successes to keep growing the demand, but grow it at a pace that you can keep up with. And you know, don't try to tackle it everything at once, because that's not going to work very well, especially if you don't have a center of excellence in place already. In some organizations, they refer to this process as institutionalization, putting in the center of excellence. It is about establishing standards and reuse in both design and development. It's about getting that leadership in place and creating a collaborative process. It's about that organization, and it's critically important when you're trying to do something big. If all you're trying to do is, I want to do one project and have a great user experience and it's not dependent on anything else, you don't need a center of excellence for that. But if you're trying to do it across a substantial ecosystem and get consistency, then this is a critical piece.
Yeah, clearly. I think now is a really good time. I have to go back to this, Dan. One of the takeaways that when I first met you, was the qualification of a good process or a good project. And this kind of falls in line with governance, and we know that UX teams are overworked, right? There's more projects than there are people in most UX teams. And so one of the things that you told me very early on is, you know, we don't take a stupid project. What do you mean by that?
Well, you need to keep your eye on the ball, basically. If what you're trying to do is bring in place a better user experience across a large group of applications, this ecosystem approach, then you need to pick out the places that make the most difference and work on those and get them right, and then incrementally move on to the next ones. And each time you do a project, you should do it in a way that the capacity for that kind of work grows based on the way you did the project. In other words, you've mentored people, they've grown, they're able to do more. So as you take on more work, the whole capacity of your initiative is growing while you're also delivering examples of how to do it the right way. So the thing I'm saying to avoid is, don't be tempted to jump on some small project where you can see you can make a big difference in a hurry. If it's a small project on the side, it's not going to move the needle on the ecosystem. It's not worth being distracted for. Just, you know, stay focused. Stay focused on making the ones that count a big success.
Yeah, that makes total sense. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is, this is a lot of information that you've presented, Dan. So where do you get started? How did you really start building this capability?
Well, for us, we already had an existing user interface team. And so this is a group of people that are designers. They had good experience with understanding requirements, with talking to users, with doing usability testing, and so forth. So we were halfway there already. And so what we did is we found some senior people to add to the mix, and brought in both UX design side people as well as some top front-end developers to take us to a newer set of technology. Then we organized a steering committee, and now that's not a bunch of managers. That's people that are in this effort, that are part of the first project, part of the Center of Excellence rather. They're practitioners, they're the experts, they're the ones that know how this is going to happen, and you charge them with pulling this together and organizing it. And then we started adding UX process steps to our software development process, our project planning processes, so that those things happen properly. Interestingly, one of the biggest barriers to UX is that people get all excited about it, but they've already committed their budgets and their timelines and their scope and everything, and they don't have room to add on the time it takes to do user research and iteratively go through the design and refine and so forth. And so in many cases, those managers are desperate to say, hey, you need to add UX onto what I'm doing, but they didn't allow for it in the plan. If the plan is locked in, you're better off not to try to jump on board, because there's not the right conditions for success, right? If there's not funding, if there's not a timeline, if there's not resources, the conditions for success don't exist. So jumping on board is kind of a futile thing. You will get a compromised result at best. so starting with the right project is critical, and keeping that focus. So we did pick an initial project and launched it, and then around that we created a Center of Excellence. So as you do the initial project, you also work on things like technical frameworks and reusable components and so forth, and you put those into the Center of Excellence, and you use them on the first project, and you start to build up the base of knowledge and deliverables that are going to come out of the Center of Excellence over the long run. We also created what we call peer reviews. So peer review is basically saying no one is dubbed the expert. No one is ordained as the czar of UX or the czar of front-end development. You want to have multiple opinions and multiple people involved in hammering out the best ideas. It's a collaboration, and when you do it that way, you get richness in the ideas because multiple people from multiple backgrounds bring different experiences, and you get to hammer through those and pick out the best ones. But everybody learns from that process, and you build relationship, and you start to have a community that will actually be successful and support each other. And then obviously you have to be committed to continuous improvement. But this has been our formula for how you create a seed and make something get going.
Cool. Now comes the fun part. So you're going to walk us through a couple of successes and how UX impacted the business. So go ahead and take it away.
Well, so I can talk about it to some degree. We are constrained by intellectual property rules and all of that, confidentiality, so I can talk about it at a high level. So one of our stories is about a large international bank. We've been working with them for quite a long time, over a decade, and they worked with us, hired us to help them build a suite of applications to manage hedge funds. And this set of tools got more and more complex over time, and we started to hear difficulties in getting people up to speed and that kind of thing. We always had kind of the opinion from management is, we don't have to worry about usability. They are employees, and they have to use the tools to do their job, so they have to do it. You don't have to lure them into doing it. They have to do it. So there wasn't a lot of sensitivity around usability issues. And so what we ended up with is something that was becoming more and more difficult to use, and in some cases inefficient. So finally we convinced them that we should put some UX design into it, at least explore the possibility. And so we brought in a very senior UX designer, someone who could do both research and design. And she spent 9 weeks working with this team and with the business, with the users, and really in a very short time was able to put together kind of the biggest pain points that needed to be dealt with, and to put together a concept for how to organize the application, how to organize navigation, how to take out a lot of the little gotchas that were causing people to make mistakes or to be inefficient. And that design got very strong positive reaction from the customer, and so we took on implementation, and we focused first on building out a technical framework with reusable components for the various controls that were needed in order to implement the full design. That took us about 3 months to pull together, but the focus here was on let's convert a small portion of the applications, and let's make sure that we're doing it the right way, and that we have all of our standards and our framework very clear. And that enabled us to get the rest of the development team up to speed on how to apply those concepts across the rest of the applications, and then we converted the remainder of the user interface in about 6 months. The result then was a high quality and consistent user experience, making it far easier to learn and use. It increased user productivity and decreased the number of human errors that came out of it. Another thing that happened out of it is they were starting to experience in certain roles within the organization turnover that was higher than they were comfortable with. And this improvement in the user experience helped slow that down.
Yeah, you can't afford to lose good people, can you?
Well, especially if they're working with a complex process. The learning curve on the process alone is significant. And so if you can make it easier for somebody to learn, then the pain of a turnover is less, but also the number of turnovers themselves is less because people are not frustrated with it.
Right, right. Super. And you've got one more to share with us?
So I'll return to the Fortune 100 manufacturer story. Basically, the driving force here was that over many, many years of developing applications across a wide number of business processes involving the dealer community, this particular manufacturer had inadvertently created some poor user experience for the dealer. And the dealers started complaining hard enough that they pick up the phone and call the CEO. Well, it doesn't take too many phone calls to a Fortune 100 CEO from their value chain people to get a lot of attention on it. So they started out working on doing user research and doing some design, and we got involved with the design already partially underway. And we worked with them to validate the ongoing designs. We helped them with prototyping, developing a complex set of prototypes to allow them to go to some dealer events where groups of dealers get together to talk about a wide variety of things. But we used that time to put the mock-ups in front of the prototypes, I should say, in front of the dealers, so that they could see what it would look like, what was being proposed. Before the plan is all locked in, you get the dealers' feedback. And out of that, we got very positive feedback from dealers. And so once again, we dove into establishing a full development team and built out our framework. And then we developed the front-end application for this large process. And then, like any UX situation, you're working on continuous improvement. As you make releases and users have a chance to explore them and experiment with them, new ideas come back and you fold those in. The result is, first and foremost, the complaints to the CEO quit. Both business side people and the dealer people, they got confident that their message had already gotten to the CEO and that action was underway to resolve the issues. So they did not feel a need to call anymore. This is a huge thing in a company of that size. So what we have is I'm going to say, emerging client-specific center of excellence. It's emerging because this is a very small number of applications. One of them is quite large, but it's still the initial starting point for this channel organization. And we're pulling together that center of excellence by getting the standards documented, getting the technical frameworks and reusable components and so forth together. Also getting together reading materials and courses to take to improve skills and that type of thing. So it's an emerging center of excellence that's having a very distinct impact on quality and efficiency of the projects that are following the first major project. The application itself is on track. It's still not in production. It's underway. It's in system integration testing, and the result here is there's a very high level of excitement about what's literally a dramatically improved user experience for this portion of the dealer's processes. So
what really?
Very interesting. It's just been very interesting to watch this one roll out.
Yeah, I think what's really hitting home with me on this one is that I think half the excitement, speaking with a user, half the excitement is generated just by being a part of that development process or that design process, where your opinion is brought into that decision making through usability testing and research. So that alone is a benefit. That alone is a benefit. That's very cool. Congratulations on those.
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. Once people get the message from senior management, they're very serious about being high quality about this user experience. People want to be part of that. They want to be part of solving the problem. They want to be part of something that they can be very proud of when it goes out live. And so there is a great deal of enthusiasm and support for the project.
Super. And so the next question is, you touched on this earlier as you were talking. You're saying not every project requires an entire UX team. So really the next question is, does every project require UX touch?
Well, so I think the answer is a little complicated. The reality gets in the way, I guess. Conceptually, if you were to bring UX design and advanced front-end development to every single project, conceptually it would drive improvement, and in some cases a lot of improvement. The reality, though, is that it's not feasible because of the barriers in the way, and really two huge barriers. One of them is lack of skills, both IT and design skills, and then another one is lack of organizational maturity around UX. And an example of that is we've had people come up to us and say, oh my gosh, my project is 2 weeks from going into the system testing and I need UX. Can you put UX in now? And of course, that's, that ship has sailed. You can't inject it at the end. It doesn't work that way. And so you have to deal with educating the organization in terms of how it will work, and then work on the projects that will do it in a way where, as I said before, the conditions for success exist. You don't want to go in on one that just can't succeed. But then, as the barriers get resolved, you can expand your efforts. Start out narrow, be successful on everything you touch, and as you start to build more capacity in the skills and experience, and you get some maturity growing in the organization, then you expand how many applications you can tackle. So my opinion is clear here that you're better off to do it really well on a few than to do it mediocre on a lot.
Yeah. So two things here. So number one, you mentioned, it's too late to bring UX in when you are like 48 hours to launch or 2 weeks to launch. It's more realistic, right? But once you've launched, you go back to square one and you evaluate. So you're looking at the metrics of your digital solution and how well is it working. You can then incorporate your usability researching and testing to see if what you've created is working, how well it's working, and then make modifications from there. So it's really never too late, right? Dan, it just happens at a different time.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The point I was making is you can't inject it at the end of a project, but once you go live, you're starting another iteration, and so that is the time to jump in and do the research. Absolutely. Yep,
that's cool. And this is actually where your team comes into play. So if a company, an organization, or an agency doesn't have the resources, this is where they can call you into the to save the day, right?
Well, save the day. Yeah,
or
we save the day sometimes. We jump in and add value, and we can start at various places. Almost no one gets a greenfield where you can start from nothing and build something totally new from scratch. Almost all the time you're dealing with an existing set of systems, existing usage patterns, existing users, and disgruntlement in some cases. And so, you start from wherever you are and you work out a plan on how you can move forward and get to an improved user experience and the business benefits that go with it.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of if you do UX well, it's kind of like the, what do they call those, Dan, when you go into your your well visits, that you're looking at the wellness up front before you come down to the cold. So if we do this right, we're going to engage you as early in the design process as possible and keep you engaged throughout launch, and then go back in and re-engage to figure out what the next iteration is going to look like.
That's correct. The greatest business benefit comes from doing it before you write any code. The more code you have in place, the more rework you have to do if you did it wrong, or that's a little harsh. if you have opportunity for improvement, you have to undo something you did before and then redo it. And you may have also made commitments in terms of architecture and so forth that kind of lock you out of certain things, I guess a better way to say it. So it's best to start right from the beginning, but I guess the reality is that you often don't get that opportunity. That you know, the system's been around for 5 years or 10 years or more, and it's time to do a facelift. It's time to redo. And so one of the things that we're seeing here is where the projects are essentially to build a new user experience, but not to replace the entire back end. In many cases, changing out the back end, whether that's ERP or custom software, is a massive effort. And so it's not very feasible to do that in many cases. But if you've got a poor user experience for the people trying to interact with those systems, it is possible to put a new user experience on the front end of it and then integrate that user experience to the back end so that you basically preserve your investment in the back end systems, but you deliver a great user experience on the front end.
Super. Super. Well, we are running out of time here very quickly, but I did want to get to these last couple of things. So keeping a user experience team current is not necessarily easy. So what do you do to make sure that you and the UX Center of Excellence is always current on technology, processes, methodologies, best practices?
Sure. I can tell you how we do it. First of all, you try to hire the best talent you can find, and you learn from them. What we have found is that the top talent out there really like to get a lot of different varied experiences, so they tend to move from one account to another. And so if you hire these people, then you learn quite a lot because they've touched a wide variety of problems in different types of companies. We also built an expert network. I mean, anybody can do this, right? You go out and find some top people out there who are willing to consult with you on an ad hoc basis in order to share ideas and to talk about what's going on. And most of these experts that you find are working on large accounts. And so by having this dialogue on a regular basis with these experts, you're buying a little bit of their time, but you're getting exposure to all kinds of ideas and direction about what's happening out there in the world. Staying current is also, it's not just about knowing what's new, but it's also about making sure your workforce is capable of doing it where it's appropriate. So you also have to engage in continuous training and mentoring, keep folding new ideas in, create that learning environment so that you're not stuck on the way you were doing it 5 years ago. You have to not only discover the new ways, but figure out how to incorporate them. And so that whole focus on continuous improvement is a big one. And I also like to say, look out for the bleeding edge. People like to be on the latest and greatest, and I think there's a big question mark about whether the latest is really the greatest. They call it the bleeding edge for a reason. There's a lot of bleeding going on out there. So I think of it as being on the cutting edge rather than the bleeding edge, or being at the forefront, but not hang 10 on the bleeding edge. You'll have a lot of pain around that. So be realistic about when a technology or a technique is mature enough to fold into mission critical work.
Interesting. All right. Well, with a couple of minutes left, any final thoughts to share with the group?
Sure. I would just reiterate, creating this culture of excellence and innovation is a critical part. I've seen a lot of frustration around groups that try to do something great, but they don't have organizational backing to stay focused and deliver excellence. And so they get all watered down, and they get very frustrated and many times leave the organization because of it. So create that culture of excellence and innovation and support it. And remember that excellence isn't just about quality. Most people think quality is the main driver of it, and I tend to think it has a huge weight in it. But quality has to be tempered by the budgets available, the time available. There's performance considerations. There's sustainability. Whatever you create, you have to keep it alive. That's what sustainability is about. And also you have to take into account what resources you have available. So all of these things work together to be optimized to get excellence, the right combinations. And then the last point here is, don't sign up for stupid stuff. When we launched our business in '96, we had some initial great success, and we had a flood of projects come in, and we accepted them all. We were thrilled. We were growing like crazy. And what we found is a lot of the projects we were taking on did not have the conditions for success when we started them. So they were doomed, So we went through, let's say, an inversion of our quality of life for a while, where there was a lot of pain. And in the middle of that period, I just blurted out one day, new policy, no more stupid deals. And everybody laughed, but, it's not a PC way to say it, but who wants a stupid deal? If a project is doomed to fail because the conditions for success do not exist at the start of the project, why would you do it? So one day I was talking to my biggest client, and they brought me a project that didn't pass the stupid deal filter. And I just said outright, I don't want this project. It's a stupid project, and it's going to fail. And I was surprised. In hindsight, I shouldn't have been surprised, but the customer doesn't want a failure either. And so what happened was they immediately started a conversation about, well, what makes it stupid? I don't want a stupid project either. Let's figure out how to make it not be stupid. And we still did the project, but by the time we started the project, the conditions for success existed. So that's become a policy around here, and it's one that served us extremely well. You can't deliver excellence if you take on things that are doomed to fail from the beginning. And I think in large organizations sometimes, especially in middle management, they feel like they're locked in by the demands of the organization, and they don't have a choice to say no. But if you change that conversation to be, what is it going to take for this project to be successful, because those conditions don't exist yet, those internal customers don't want failed projects either. And I think you have a lot more negotiating power than you think. If the conditions for success don't exist, you have to be able to explain why they don't, and show them how it can be adjusted to work. So no more stupid deals.
I can tell you, Dan, that we could probably host an entire call on developing the qualifications of a SMART project, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So we're going to turn this back over to Vicki, but I want to personally thank you for the time that you put into the presentation and spending the time with us today for this call. And I suspect that you'll get a lot of follow-up activity. So Vicki's going to tell everybody how to get a hold of us. Vicki, to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you, Dan. I just very quickly, we're running a little long here, Dan, but I wanted you just to elaborate a little, if you would, on this. What do you mean it's all about people? Because so many people get caught up in the technology and forget the people end of things.
Sure. Well, when I founded this business, almost 19 years ago now, I was so excited about launching a technology business. And after I got into it, what I realized is technology is rarely the problem on a project that's in trouble. It's all about people and getting people to behave in the way they need to behave, working together, having a right process, and these kinds of things. It's all about people. So when I look at putting together this kind of business, I look at the priorities as people first, then process, then technology. Technology is advanced enough; it's almost never the problem. It's all these other things. So think about the people and organize around the people.
And one quick question before we go. What do you think about having a hub of UX experts and then lending them out across the organization for specific projects?
Well, that hub could be thought of as a center of excellence. The key, I think, is not it's not a black and white answer about whether it's a good idea or not. The question is, when they go out, do they have the opportunity to succeed with what they're doing? Or are they going out and spending so little time that they can't really make a difference, and then they get moved on to the next thing? If they're able to spend enough time to make a difference, absolutely, that model works.
Great. Well, Dan Neff, you certainly shared some valuable information here. We really appreciate your time today and your expertise. And of course, Lee, thanks for walking us through that too. Appreciate your time. And if you're wondering how you can get hold of Aquent Federal, you can see here a few of Aquent Federal's clients. And you can also see a list of some of the contracting vehicles that you can use to work with Aquent Federal. There's also a link at the bottom of this page where you can find information on vehicles and more information basically about how to work with Aquent Federal. We've also got a dedicated resource for you, and that person is Leanne Dries. She is, as you've gathered, very knowledgeable about this business. She's been doing it a long time. She's very accessible and is just only too glad to take your calls. So please, if you have questions, you can reach her at 410-975-4183, 410-975-4183. And this webcast will be posted on YouTube, so it will be up there on the Aquent Federal channel, so you can find it anytime you want. If you enjoyed it, please do share it with a friend or a colleague. Post it out on social media. We'd appreciate it. And that's it for today. Thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Hope you'll join us next time.